Now, be honest. Have you ever in your life wanted something simply because you wanted it? The desire that you had for the dog that you got, or the dress that you wore, or the school that you went to, or the neighborhood that you moved to, or the country that you live in. Have you ever desired something that you didn't see someone else wanting first? Think about it. Think about it. Is there anything that even it's like you saw someone, my dog, for example, I saw people with corgis and I wanted a corgi, or that dress that is so beautiful and you saw another woman wearing it. You say, I want that dress. Has there ever been anything in your life that you wanted simply because you wanted it? Watching this episode, for example, do you want to watch us talking about what it is to desire without having some celebrity tell you that this is a great stream to be watching, right? Think about that. Like, all of you here, are you here because somebody suggested this conversation to you? I'm going to let you think on that just for a minute. So if you figured it out, is there anything that you want that you didn't see someone else desiring?
Well, I was thinking about that. It's kind of, the first thing that came to mind was the Barbie townhouse that I really wanted really badly. So when I was 10 years old.
Because someone else had one, or you just, I mean, all of advertising works on this premise.
Yeah, it was the advertising.
Yeah.
I mean, a friend of mine did have it, and it was the coolest thing in the world, but it was because of the advertising, for sure. Yeah.
But okay, but I mean, if you're looking at an ad, you're already in the constructed desire of somebody else's showing you that you should want this thing.
That's deep. I didn't think that deep about it. It's just, oh, pretty. I want that. That's about all I thought.
Well, I mean, no, the thing is, we're not, it's not, the idea is not that we realize we're doing this. It's, okay, this is, we appreciate this in all brutal honesty on the Mosaic Ark, is that people watch stuff, for example, live streams, when other people tell them they should.
Yeah, true.
Please tell your friends how cool this stream is and how much you enjoy watching it. But it's like, all of advertising works on this premise. It's like why we're always trying to get the influencers to say something about our work. What are they influencing?
Yeah.
Other people's attention.
Other people's decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But this desire, it's like if you're seeing something and you think it is an interesting sort of, problem. It's like, is there ever been a desire that was simply pure? Guess who, it's your parents did it to you to start with. Look, doggy.
Well, a desire for things that aren't like basic, like nutrition and hydration and sleep and.
Well, I guess, right. But a lot of our.
But see.
Go ahead.
But what about love? Right. Is that a basic need? Now it gets a little fuzzy, doesn't it? Because people
No.
have different ideas about what that means.
Well, okay, so guys, what we're trying to do tonight for you is continue unpacking this idea of mimetic desire that the Girardian scapegoating theory depends on. And if we say it that way, you'll never understand what we're talking about.
I know I wouldn't.
Well, there is
And I've
this
been reading it for a
problem.
year.
It's like the labels. Oh, yes, Girardi, mimetic desire. Now we all know what we're talking about. And it's like, no, actually, it takes Girard like 8 books to unpack it all and to think about it. But he did start in a place that was with stories and literature, so maybe there. But that his premise being all of this structuring of desire is there present in all mythology. It's evidenced in all of these different stories, and he's suggesting it as something as basic as the stuff that like Freud would say of the developmental desires that allegedly we all go through from oral to anal to I don't know. Freud is a great storyteller too. We should do some streams on Freud and how he actually mythologized his way into science. But
he was a drug user too, right? I think he was.
That'll take us off on another tangent. Anyway, the claim that René Girard makes in this theorizing about where all of our social structure comes from and how it's grounded in religion and how religion is grounded in violence and therefore the sacred comes from this first step that he makes in saying what we want is because someone else wants it.
Only because someone else wants it?
Yes. I mean, that's how he said it that definitively. He says desire is mimetic. We want something because we see somebody else wanting it.
I've never thought about it. I'm usually not an envious type of a person normally.
So that's a good point. It doesn't start with, it's not envy as such to start with, right? It's simply seeing someone else enjoying something and we want to enjoy it too. It doesn't have. So he makes a very credible case for why the 10th commandment is the most important. I mean, it's like you have the commandment, that begins with, you shall have no other gods before me. That's about desire too. Works through all of these other, these different things about honoring your father and mother and don't steal and then sums it all up with one that most people I think feel like is like, what up with killing? I mean, what, don't covet the cow? What are you talking about? And he says, in fact, that 10th commandment is like a summation of the problem that's implicit in all of the others, which is that desire, the desire for what you see someone else desiring.
Sounds very Buddhist, doesn't it? Isn't that his main philosophy, was to get rid of all desire because it was the source of all unhappiness?
Okay, so that's a fair question. And this is not, Girard doesn't go there. This is not a problem to start with, right? This is what's interesting. The mimetic desire is not initially it's not evil, right?
It's not a fault. Whereas Gautama Buddha said it was a fault, right?
Yes.
And then he wanted to stop it. Okay. That is a big difference then.
Yes.
He starts from the premise that it's not a fault, it's just human nature.
Right. It's
and human nature isn't bad. It's just how it's channeled.
Okay, so in Buddhism, it's all existence is suffering. Suffering arises from desire. Extinguished desire, suffering goes away, but you also vanish yourself, right? Because there's no cycle of desiring.
Isn't that interesting? So he knew it too. So he knew what Girard knew too. This is just human nature. But I haven't studied Buddhism at any length, but so I've extremely rudimentary knowledge of it. But he acknowledged from what you just said that you would be disappearing the human being if you got rid of all desire.
Ooh, you're on tonight. Okay, my head's still on the Franciscans, and I can't think straight at all except for to tell you about Franciscans. Okay, so the Buddhist structured claim, to say it a little more slowly, is he sees suffering, he sees age and illness and death, and concludes all life, life is suffering. He says, so the problem is like, how do you get out of that suffering? And defines it as, oh, it's because it's the desire, right? That desire for, and the unfulfilled desire is painful, and therefore to get rid of the desire is to extinguish the suffering. And yet, as you rightly say, it extinguishes, you stop, the ego dies if you can extinguish the suffering. So you're right, it is a similar insight. But for Girard, the first step is not that it's not that it's sinful or that it's crushing or destructive. It's actually just like how we learn to want stuff. I mean, it's like,
Right.
and I'd say I'm not sure about the breast of your mom, but your mother does teach you to look at stuff, right? Look, and there's a
Oh, yeah.
there's a looking. Your mother is, I want that doggy. See the doggy? It's like you've heard that in, the park a gazillion times. Look at the. And,
Yeah.
one way of thinking of it is we're teaching the children language, right? You're repeating the word, this, point, sign, stuff like that. But you're also teaching the child to care about seeing it, right? To see the doggy.
Mm-hmm. An appreciation of actual physical things, not a detachment from them.
Well, right. And that's, the Buddhism is, if we could go with that as a counterexample, saying that, the best thing is to extinguish all of this attention and desire out of compassion, because it just generates suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Ten Commandments, when it talks about coveting, it's not saying that it's bad to want things. It's saying it's bad to want the things that other people have, specifically a man's wife, a man's cow. You don't steal, you don't commit adultery.
Right.
Right. You're not taking things from other people. It's a difference between that and saying, a man saying, I want a wife too, I'm going to go buy a cow. That's a great idea. Right. So that's the mimetic desire difference.
Right. And that's where it starts becoming a problem. So to see a man be married and say, oh, that marriage thing, I want that marriage thing too. I will, endeavor to find myself a wife. No problem, right? It's like, and in fact, this sort of mimesis, this desire for imitation is culture, right? All of culture depends on mimesis. And that you are, well, in art, it's like if you say art is realistic or something like that, it's like art imitating nature is one feature of this, right? It's like you see the beautiful flower, and you have this longing for that flower, and maybe your expression of longing is to then try to paint it. Right, to represent that flower, to mimetic, to the mimesis of representational art is this longing for that, the flower that you've seen, and so you imitate it, right? Mimesis, imitation of itself is not bad. It's how we learn. It's how we create.
Yes.
It's how we participate with each other. You have no culture if you're not mimetically directed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
And think further. It's like, the AI problem. Why do we always gonna end up in AI? The AI problem is that it's mimesis without the human desire, right? It's like it's this sort of faux generated imitation of.
Oh, that's a really good observation. Maybe that's where the creep factor comes from. When you're looking at it, it's just like, oh, this just looks wrong. It's like you're badly manufacturing, let's say, what a human being looks like, because they can't do that at all, faces and hands. It's really creepy. But you're manufacturing what you're asking a computer to manufacture human desire.
Yes.
And it can't do that. It just can't, because
it
doesn't have a soul.
It doesn't have a desire. It's imitating. Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting. The AI is imitating without the desire. It's simply mimetic. but it's not even,
Right.
it's imitating other imitations since it's all generated off of
Right.
previous
An
art.
artist has a soul. An artist sees a flower and wants to recreate the beauty
Mm.
so that it can re-experience what what the artist experienced when they first saw it. A computer can't do that. And it's not just memory. It's the soul. I think your soul can recognize things too, and that's emotion. That's not a chemical reaction in your brain. That's something that comes from the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Computer's never going to have that, and it shows, and it's scary looking.
And I'd say if the uncanny valley of imitation is that there's no desiring there. I mean, talk about off topic, right? I did not think we were going to go here, but this actually, no, it gets it. Sorry, so I just saw the University of Chicago just announced to us that it's got its own AI, generative AI, and I'm like, talk about like advertising, right? It's generative. It's like, no, it's not generative. Trying to make it sound like it's biological.
Is that about getting together with another computer and making little computer babies? What does that mean?
Yes, it's generative AI, and because our mascot is a phoenix, right? So it's the Phoenix AI, and it's generative, and I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then they also had to send out a notice to our students saying, we have this ability, but it's different in different disciplines about whether or not you're being allowed, how you're allowed to use this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in horror.
A horror show just in time for Halloween.
Oh my goodness. But this is what I realized is, you're the only, I don't know whether anybody's had this theory of economic like value, but it's mine now. If I haven't seen anybody write about it. It's like I've made this up all by myself. Things have value because people desire them, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so it's fascinating and fantastic to imagine. It's like, oh, so we're going to generate all this stuff, and who wants it? If nobody wants it, it has zero value. That's been a little bit of our problem of finding a market for our stuff.
Yeah, you have to create your market, right? You have to gin up interest.
Generate desire. Yeah. And the mimesis, right? And this is the advertising part. It's like the mimesis only comes about when other people seem to desire it too, right? So if the computer desires it, who cares, right? You know that you only value something when you see other people desiring it.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's the clever plan of the advertisers.
Yes, they want to generate this desire, which we resent because we think you're just creating this desire that I didn't even have in the first place. You tricked me into wanting this thing that I didn't want. But they're manipulating. Mm-hmm. It only works because they're manipulating off of that insight that Girard starts with, was that he'd say that we want what we want because we see somebody else wanting it. And that, I mean, yeah.
It's an interesting
just to back up, the advertisers live off of this, right? Whether or not we can test this to say, is there actually anything I've ever wanted that I didn't see someone else wanting? And you have to be honest and say, that toy that you were completely indifferent to and your sibling starts playing with it. Now, who generated it for them? Then you want it more, right? It's like we know that you've felt this before. I'm completely uninterested in it until this cute person that I really like from the internet seems also to like that thing, and now I like it too.
Yeah. I was going to say they're trying it at advertisers. I don't know if you can call them that. Maybe social engineers are kind of seeding the internet these days with stories about, I'm 42 and childless, and I'm not married, and I'm happy, and I'm living my best life, and I don't need any kids. It's like they're trying to convince women to just not get married and have children. It's like, well, why would you need to convince women to? Are you lonely? Do you want some company?
Right.
I mean, why would you do this? The answer is not because she's lonely and wants some company. She's paid to do this, but they're trying to, through Mimetic Desire, get women to act a certain way.
Right.
And I mean, there are depopulationists that this is their true religion, and they do try to spread this gospel. this is the way they're doing it right now. And Russia just passed a law outlawing that kind of propaganda on their airwaves. You're not allowed to promote childlessness because
because it actually works.
Demographic collapse.
Right. This is what we've been worried about. Worried about with mass formations and how do people. So if you guys, if you're in like the high theory mode and you're still with us at this point, and I haven't like pointed to something you desire, that in Matthias Desmet's description of mass formation, he does not give a mechanism for the contagion, and this does, right? That Desmet's theorizing about how this has created this mass formation and arises in times of high anxiety and stuff like that. It's like that's not the mechanism. That's a description of the way people are behaving. But what Girard would point to is saying the mechanism is desire, right? And you can the contagion of seeing lots of people wanting the same thing. And, those of us who are, dissident or awkward or socially inept, who never want what anybody else wants. And my fashion is completely mine, which is total lie. None, like, there's always some subset of thing we're fitting into, right? That
there's always something in the back of your mind going, oh yeah, that's where I got that idea for that outfit. Okay.
I'm owning my granny weatherwax longing. That the mechanism is always this monkey see, monkey do, right? It's there's something about we imitate each other. I mean, there's whole schools of medieval Christian devotion based on this, which is called imitatio Christi, right?
Oh, right, imitation of Christ.
The imitation of Christ is like model yourself on him. Okay, we can do a whole episode on that, but the first step is to understand that this mechanism of desire is like fundamental. Okay.
Yes. Well, it's, as you pointed out, it's how we learn.
It's how we learn.
Our mothers teach us.
It's how our, yes.
Right.
It creates all of culture. Everything about it is, in that sense, is not just neutral. It's humanizing, right? It's what we are as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this problem. So
it's because we're social. Even those of us who are like, kind of live like hermits, we're still social. That's just what human beings are.
That's good too. That's actually still fine. That's okay. So he's saying
it's not bad.
But Girard says step one. And guys, if you get our newsletter, these notes are there. So like you want to review and catch up, or go back and
I'm still catching up.
I'm trying to do this slowly enough that people will get it
she reads so fast.
I do. You want to be me. You want to read as much as I do. Imitate me, and Philip, never have any money for clothes because you're spending it all on books.
All on books.
Okay, so step one is desire is fundamentally mimetic, right? And say meaning we want what we want because we see somebody else wanting it. All advertising is based on this truism. We don't want things simply because they are good, beautiful, or true. At least as sinners, right? And we should. It's like the good, the beautiful, and the true. We should simply want it. We want them because we see somebody else wanting them. Which, as again, I'm saying, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You see your parents, you model yourself on your parents. You see your friends, you model yourself on your friends. This is why we worry about it, because people do this, right? This Hypergamouse Kickstarter that just started topically. It's easiest to see this if you do start thinking in terms of rivalries, right? It's like, why are married men more attractive than single men? Because clearly some women wanted.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Same way with married women, right? It's like you
Same with married women. What do you mean she's taken? Oh,
darn it! Now I really want her, right? So the rival. Yeah. So and Girard talks about this. He in his original theorizing, he's a literature critic, right? He's a literary critic, and he's seen how often in literature, particularly in Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, the guys are wanting the same woman, right? And this drives the entire story. It's the Iliad, right? Everything about Paris and Helen and Menelaus is driven by Paris visiting Menelaus, seeing Menelaus's beautiful wife Helen, kidnapping her, or no, she runs off with him. It's hard to say. Love triangles like that are driven by this reality that someone wanted by somebody else, it becomes more desirable.
Yeah. Yeah. The Bible's full of stories of that too, like David and Bathsheba.
Right. And so this is where it becomes the sinfulness comes in when you're desiring the forbidden object, which makes it even more desirable, right? You're desiring the forbidden object, which is forbidden by Commandment 10, saying no, because in fact, if that happens, you start disrupting the whole of society, right? If you just start desiring the things of your neighbor and wanting to, it's so much that you will do the other things for them, lie, steal, kill, commit adultery, big trouble, right? Adultery is, like I said, what Girard says, the 10th commandment it's a blanket version of everything else. That covetousness is the inappropriate desire for the same object. So I realized there's a half step in there. There's desire is fundamentally mimetic, and the problems start arising when you start desiring not just a similar object, but the very same object.
Yeah.
Okay. Step 2. Mimetic rivalry makes the competitors for the desired object more and more similar. And this is some of what we were talking about last time with, like, when two competitors are in they're competing for the same object, the rivalries, the competitors will end up as mirror images of each other, which I was realizing before I'd ever even read Girard, that the candidates in our political parties do that. But the problem is, it's because this desire is for the same object that we end up in all these binaries, and everybody's, oh, why is everything so binary, and why is it? Because you're competitors for the same object of desire.
Right. I have to be what that guy is, but better at it than him. And the other guy thinks the same thing. And so they start becoming more like each other.
Yes. Right. And what Girard does talk about this quite nicely, that they become more and more similar because they're competing for the same thing. So the object itself gives them their similarity. You could see these pairs spinning up because they're in fact desiring the same thing.
Right. Or the ugly side of that coin is, like, during a time of war, when you want to win, you need to win so badly that you start becoming more like your enemy, becoming more ruthless.
Just ruthless, just everything, right? I've used this a lot in teaching, particularly 20th century history, because you can see how it's a culture happens. So everybody starts imitating forms of rallies and military formation and things like that. But the twinning of it's like armies that are fighting each other basically always look alike. I mean, they certainly ones that twin up in the same level of military ability, but it happens. It's like any military engagement you can imagine. The two sides adapt to each other and they turn into each other. It's pretty persistent. And they can feel like they're on complete opposite sides, and one's completely good and one's completely evil. But the problem is they actually are mirroring each other. So,
well, their tactics can, for sure.
Yeah. So
I'll get to that later.
The twins, right? So mimetic rivalry makes the competitors for the desired objects more similar. We need to convince you of that, and this rivalry and these pairings and this twinning before we go to step 3, which is how you deal with this rivalry. But what we wanted to do this time was make it clear how this dynamic works. And so we have some more pairs for you, right? Last time we were talking about the way Trump and Harris are twinning themselves because of their desire for winning the same election. But we have some more examples. Is everybody with us so far? Always check whether or not there's... Oh, look. Okay. Hello, everyone. Mel and Amy and Robert. Robert is mechanisms of the contagion. Yes, we're getting there. Amy, I think we desire some things innately and for their own sake, not just out of imitation. Well, this is our challenge. Like the transcendentals, if I were the only person in existence, I think I'd still long for them, for God. Aha! That gave me my way out. Trinity. That's why we know God's a Trinity. It works within the Godhead as well. The love for each other, the love for the Father and the Son, and the desire. And that God is actually creative and generative in the way the AI
Yes,
is.
not like a computer.
Yeah, that's an interesting, because God longs for the Godhead. And Adrian von Speyer has a wonderful setup for prayer and talking about this, that when we pray, we're participating in the Trinity's longing for itself. But that makes no sense if God isn't the Trinity. So there's a theological proof in the Transcendentals, which we can work on. Okay, but anyway, this is all horribly abstract, although it sounds like some of our watchers are getting it. Good. So we thought we'd test it with some examples. And we have, of course, Indiana Jones. which makes the point beautifully in what Belloq says to Indiana when they're in the cafe. And of course, Indiana thinks Marion has died, and so he's mourning. He's drunk, right? He's in the setup, and I like the way they costumed them here, so that Indiana has the Dr. Jones has the dark hat, and Belloq is in the white hat. Yeah. And yet Indiana is supposed to be the good guy, isn't he? Right? And Belloq says to him, so I can't do it in the French, but so you and I are very much alike, Indiana. Archaeology is our religion. This is such a great. Yet we have both fallen from the pew of faith. I think he said pew of faith rather than pure faith. Did you get this accurately from a?
I think it was. I'm sorry. It's maybe pure faith, I think.
Is it pure faith? I thought it was pew of faith. Okay. Our methods have not differed as much as you pretend. I am but a shadowy reflection of you. It would take only a nudge to make you like me, to push you out of the light. Now, of course, what's funny about this is in the scene, it's so brilliantly filmed. Good job. Who did this? Spielberg. As they're talking, Indiana's in the shadow and Belloq's in the light, and Belloq is talking about how, no, you and I in our, okay, help me unpack this for everyone. Okay.
I'll try. Right now. I noticed the white too, that he was wearing, and the director, Steven Spielberg, kind of reversed that. Indy's, he's wearing dark, dusty clothes. He's dirty. He's drunk. He's in the shadow, but he's also righteous. His sorrow and his anger is righteous. And Belloq is in the light. He's crisp. He's wearing this linen suit. He's lighthearted, despite the fact that this woman just died, and he probably knew her father too. Right. And he's just, basically he's just there to antagonize him. And I love when he says, you and I we're not too unalike. He's not wrong. They are very much
They're totally alike.
They both want something very similar. They have very different ways of getting it.
Do they?
Right. And yes, because Indy's digging stuff up, and this is twice now Belloq showed up and stole it from him, right?
Well, okay, so we have
nothing you can find that I can't take.
Yeah, that. Okay, so we've had, it's like, has everyone seen the movie, right? That in the openings,
only 30 or 40 times.
It's John Williams music. That's I love it. What we see Indiana doing at the very beginning of the movie is stealing an idol from this community, right? He's stealing their precious.
Yeah,
he's stealing.
Yeah.
Right?
But it belongs in a museum. It's like, but these people are literally worshiping it. It belongs to them.
And Belloq, come on. Indiana's going in. He's sneaking in. Okay, he's clever, right? He's managed to get past all the traps and everything, and he straight up steals this idol, which then triggers the traps in the shrine,
traps.
runs out. You know, the other greedier guy who doesn't want to put it in a museum, just wants to be greedy and you know, leave Indiana behind. Alf Molino, poor guy, gets killed by the traps, and when he gets out, he finds Belloq there, who has in fact befriended the people whose idol he's trying to steal. Now, who's the bad guy?
Right. It depends. What did Belloq do with the idol?
We don't know. Well, we
It's
don't know.
It's not
we don't
explained.
know. And so Indiana goes back to his university, and is telling, you know, his friend Marcus, you know, I had it. I just need to be able to go buy it on the black market.
And do what with it? Return it to the natives?
No, put it in the museum, because of course, the righteous thing to do in all of this is put things in museums. Now,
there's some kind of commentary on the Elgin marbles in here somewhere.
Oh, this is we could spend the rest of the time. You have some other brilliant examples that I know you thought really hard about, so I'm not going to hold you forever on Indiana Jones, but we're going to talk about it for a little longer, because there is you know, whether Spielberg is this clever or not, I don't know. This is a very nicely written scene. That because Indiana, he's in this American. It's American versus French in this particular engagement, right? But this American, you know, it belongs to the world kind of thing. You stole it from their shrine. Yeah. And Belloq's going to sell it to somebody else, a collector or something like that. It's like, okay, this is actually a real question in the trade in antiquities. Right?
Yes, it is.
Does it belong to the museums, or does it belong to the country that you're stealing it from in the first place?
Right. Yeah, that's I know US Customs probably still has a section that looks just at stolen antiquities, because it's a big problem. So yeah, you get in a lot of trouble trying to sneak it into this country.
I was on a whole committee about this. Right? This is what the Cultural Property Advisory Committee in the State Department, that I was appointed by President Trump. I have a presidential commendation to be on this committee. And then they fired me because the administration caught up with the fact that he wasn't president at the time. The whole point of this committee was advising, interestingly, between museums, collectors, and the academics on which items from the countries that were petitioning for help would be put on the list. And it's actually I mean, it had museums, collectors, and academics on this, because these three in their exchange are not all in agreement on like what's the right answer, right? Particularly the coin collectors, but there's antiquity collecting that goes on generically. The museums are part of this, right? They buy objects. No,
they do. They just have to make sure they weren't stolen when they buy them. But yeah.
Well, in the 30s, when this movie is set,
provenance is difficult.
Some of the things
exactly
have interesting provenance, right? We're not quite sure how they got in the collection, and now, you know, right now I'm going off on a tangent here. It's a huge conversation in the museum world, because sometimes the things in their collections now don't have proper provenance. The guys like Indiana Jones stole it and said it belongs in museum.
No, they probably said it belongs in the pocket of the guy who sent me to get it.
I
think that happened a lot.
They ended up in the Field Museum.
Eventually,
in Chicago,
right?
Oh gosh, it happens all the time.
Some guy dies and says, "I'm generous. I'm going to donate my entire collection of these antiquities."
No. It's like the museums did collecting too. Indiana is not that. Indiana is not that fictional in that sense.
Yeah. He was a treasure hunter.
Yes, but the problem, it's like treasure hunting, and Belloq is saying you're doing it for these high. But the thing is, so we had the paired collection. It's like, here's Indiana sneaking into the Well of Souls. I love the scene, and finding out where on the map, the actual Ark is going to be, and he gets to find the Ark, and then Belloq, because he's partnered with the bad guys, gets to keep it and then open it and have his head blown off. Wait a minute. I'm spoiler alert. I'm skipping ahead.
It was melted off, not
it
blown
exploded.
Off.
He exploded in the end, didn't he? Melted it. No, well, not. Oh, anyway. Right.
No, the reason I picked those two was because it's great to put that right next to the quote where he says, you know, he mentioned, I said something like some of our techniques are the same or something like that, or the way we do this.
Our methods are not as our methods have not differed as much as you pretend, which they don't, right? And so Indiana was stealing from the Juvitos at the beginning, and he's
not just that though, but they're both doing kind of almost religious ceremonies to find the treasure, to find what's in it, right? So Indy's holding the staff of Ra. He's dressed like an Arab. He, you know, and then
the swelling is music. Opening we got choirs of angel things.
He's opening the Ark, but he has to say these priestly prayers, and he's dressed like an Old Testament priest.
Yes.
He said, "No, we want to do everything right here." Right. And and the actor was just brilliant because he looked really nervous.
He was very good, very good.
As well he should, right? Because he blew up afterwards. But
well, he gets to say it's beautiful first, right? And
yeah, but they were very much alike, and they right down to the costuming and the dramatics and taking all these artifacts very seriously and trusting that they were actually very powerful.
Yes,
and they were. Well, I think intellectually they were twins. They were definitely twins for sure.
They were totally twins, and of course the whole the movie runs off of their rivalry. Yes, and including that René tries to make nice with Marion when he finds out she's
that's a nice way to.
Well, I don't know. He gave her wine. And
he tries to make time with Marion. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to say what he's doing. He buys her a pretty dress. Come on.
It's a negligee.
No, it's not. It's a ball gown.
And then he tries to get her drunk.
The negligee. The negligee comes on the ship. He gives her a dress. Come on. He's a French. Wow. He's French. He's given her something nice to drink and eat, and gets her drunk, which we know for no. Okay, so. But it's a nice comment in the movie on, and yes, we know Indiana is probably involved with Marion when she's too young. We know that, guys. Don't worry.
I never understood that I was 13 years old when this came out. When she said I was a child, I thought she meant she was just young and inexperienced, not that she was a literal child. What's disturbing is later the director saying, "Oh no, she was totally a child." I'm like, "Ew, what's wrong with you, man?"
I'm afraid that's Spielberg. That comes from that famous script conference when they're trying to figure out how young could she have been for it to be as outrageous. And since in the movie as released, they don't say an age. All she says was, "I was a child. It was wrong, and you knew it." And he said, "You knew what you were doing, right?" Okay, so. There's other tensions in there, but that Indiana is given that he doesn't keep he loses the Ark because René steals it from him. He loses he constantly losing everything because René is taking it from him, and that gives him the test on whether he's going to rescue her as opposed to want the Ark, right? So there's a rivalry in terms of what thing they're desiring most, her or the artifact.
Yeah, which tells me he wanted her just because Indy had her.
Right? Well, you can see how all of literature and drama is driven by this.
Yeah, it is.
Girard was right that how do you get drama spun up? It's mutual desire for the same object.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's also other layers for us as viewers of this story of who we side with, right? Do you side with Indiana wanting the Ark? Do you decide with René wanting the Ark? And your desire as an audience member is going to be, it's critical whose point of view you take. That's the whole point of the way we tell stories now.
It's interesting that the brilliant ending where he says, where do you have it? Top men are working on it. Top men, right? And then you see it disappearing in a box in the middle of the National Archives, which is exactly what the Nazis would have done with it. They would have warehoused it all with all the other treasures they were looting. It's an
True.
interesting choice for an ending.
True, but I think the idea was they were going to use it too in their
Because
armies.
it was a weapon?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So the Nazis wanted to use it as a weapon. So,
Right.
okay, so the implication there was that the Americans thought it was a weapon too, but then they boxed it and put it in a warehouse.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But okay, so but the problem of for the viewer is, I mean, you want to okay, this is a little meta level. That you want to see the movie because they're going after cool things. Right.
Yeah.
It's like
the adventure.
I
It's
love
great.
treasure hunt movies, right? It's
Me
like
too.
give me a gemstones, sacred artifacts,
I know.
national treasure. That's like
I'll
treasure
take pot shards, anything. I love archaeology.
treasure hunt movies are great.
Yeah. It's just exciting. Yeah, you're digging up something nobody's seen. And well, this is where I sympathize with Belloq and the speech he gives. Right? It's take this common object and it's nothing. It's you can buy it for pennies, but buried in the ground for 1,000 years.
Men will kill for
priceless.
it. Yes.
Yeah.
But the whole movie is about this mimetic desire of and I think what you're choosing these images to think about, and they're mimesis of the people who made the object too.
Yes. Ooh, good point. Yeah. So they're also copying the people that made them originally. Yeah.
And that we want the object because we want the ark. I mean, we, the viewers, right? I think there were a fair number of viewers, right? So I think they hit the mimesis fairly powerfully. There's more for the Ark and the Grail than there was for the stones of Krishna.
Temple of Doom.
Yeah, the Temple of Doom. But and the thing is, I think Temple of Doom didn't work as well because the objects weren't as desirable.
That's sad.
Not for the audiences they were making these movies for.
Well, I mean, what was the object in the Temple of Doom, right?
It was a stone. It was a stone with a diamond in it.
Oh, that's right. Right.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. People couldn't relate to it the same way.
So we need, and this is my problem constantly in scholarship. It's like, what are you going to get people interested in? One of my roles as a teacher is I be excited in it, and that's they were so enthusiastic, right? It's like I need to be, I better be enthusiastic about what I'm studying because why would anybody care about it if I'm not, right? Mm-hmm. There's the desire for the thing, but going back to I said our culture depends on you want to desire that thing, right? Mm-hmm. Our culture, our religion, our God, and how do we point people to it? Meta level, okay, all right. So hopefully, I have to go back to our mimetic watchers here. Okay, Robert is the Americana rivalry machine stowed away. Hit the mime. Hit the like, people. Yes, thank you, Caravaggio. Hit the like. Okay. So this is, if you realize that you will, if you start watching for this mechanism, this mimetic rivalry, it's in all of our literature, right? It's
yes.
it's every superhero with his antithesis, rival. There's another word for it. Maybe that's all. It all of them need their, there's another word for the guy who's against them. Belloq is Indiana's
nemesis,
yeah. Right, that we are interested and activated by these kinds of rivalries. And and what Girard saw is he started in literary criticism. He's found them, deep in some fairly sophisticated stories like Brothers Karamazov and stuff. But structurally, they're quite familiar because they basically drive us in all of our interactions and literature and drama and storytelling. The shared desire. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of trying to think of examples, but you've already come up with the best one. So
Well, it's just, I mean, these are the ones Girard uses, like the Iliad and
yeah,
Dostoevsky and stuff. And he was saying that you'll find them pretty much everywhere. The competition for the girl is one of them, is one of the most basic ones. But it's interesting that in Raiders of the Lost Ark, we have this pairing of the
yeah, it was
methods,
perfect
right?
pairing.
And therefore you can see it would not have been, there's no story in it if Indiana is just trying to beat the Nazis. He needs
Well,
Belloq to be his
it
nemesis.
was better. It was better with a nemesis, with a personal nemesis, not just
Yeah,
a nebulous group called the Nazis out there.
right,
That would have been a much thinner story. It was way better.
right. So love triangles. They work in literature. How do they work in history? Here's a triangle. Okay, so you put these together for us to think about, and this one I'm really interested how you're gonna get us through Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt.
Oh, well, the triplets, right? Not just twinning, but they're the triplets.
You've left
So
you've
this
left
was
out the one that they're all fighting against. I mean, one I told you.
he's
Wait,
not part of the group.
well, okay, this is, I mean, the where Hitler fits in this, because these three guys are the set that they are because they're all fighting the same one. So
Right.
there's a set because they all
And
have the same enemy
none of them liked each other.
and they all hated each other.
All,
Okay.
all three of them did similar things
So
during times of war.
do you want me to read the quotes, or do you want to talk through what you've seen them do first?
Well, the quotes. I mean, the quote from Churchill is probably the best because they're from his memoirs. I think that was an excerpt. Franklin Roosevelt. So I'll just say, let's start with Churchill. He's the guy in the middle, and he was the oldest here. So he was a war correspondent during the Boer War, and he witnessed what Kitchener had done there to try to win that war for the British, and it was pretty shameful. He did something, and here's another twin. He did something that William Tecumseh Sherman did during the Civil War, which was to completely make completely desolate all the farmlands, starve the women and children so that the men would be demoralized and return home and stop fighting. That was what he was trying to do with the Boers. And so he destroyed all the farms and he rounded up the women and children. And he shoved them all into camps and let them die. The ones whose
Kitchener
men
did.
stopped. Kitchener did this. The men who stopped fighting, their women and children would get more food and they would get less food if they didn't. So he was purposely starving these women and children. And then this is where Churchill's memoir came in. He was a war correspondent there.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned that there was a woman that found out about this. I can't remember her name now. She was a journalist and she exposed it and she demanded Parliament put a stop to it. Right.
Okay.
And eventually they did. Now, why I included this for Churchill is because he was excusing it, in my opinion. He was excusing it as, well, this is war and ethics are really, they're kind of tough to understand. And he was making all these kind of excusing comments about this because I think, if I had to take a guess, he didn't want to say something bad against his country, that his country had done something bad and it's something that should be condemned.
Oh, well, I've spent the last couple of days reading Patrick Buchanan's book on Churchill, Hitler, and the unnecessary war. And oh no, Churchill.
Yeah,
Churchill said a lot of things. He was gleeful for the First World War, and he kind of he said, there's a famous quotation that's to the effect of, I shouldn't feel this way, but I'm just like. He was over the moon about how cool it was going to be, and the reason he was there in the Boer War is as a war correspondent begged to get there so that he could see some of it. Right, he's fairly young in his mid-20s, so
24, 25 is very young. Yeah.
So this passage that you're describing is the passage you have is from when he's reporting on the concentration camps.
Well, he's recalling. So it's kind of a memoir. He's recalling what happened, in the concentration camps and how it got ended because a woman brought it to Parliament's attention. Yeah, that was just his commentaries, but they were very dismissive
Okay,
of
is it both of
the
these
scale
paragraphs?
of
Let me
human
read both of them.
misery.
So then area by area, every man, woman, and child was swept into concentration camps. This is the Boers. Right.
Yes,
Such methods could only be justified by the fact that most of the commandos fought in plain clothes and could
so he justified it.
only be subdued by wholesale imprisonment, together with the families who gave them succor.
Gave them succor right there. You're helping them. You're feeding these people. We're going to stop you from feeding them. This is what Sherman did.
And the next paragraph is his too.
Yes.
The ethics of
Yes.
slaughter are naturally obscure. What?
Ethics of
The
slaughter.
ethics of slaughter are naturally obscure?
No, they're not. They're not. No, they're not. There's nothing vague about it. Killing children is wrong. Starving women to death is wrong.
But one clear principle cannot be overlooked. And the civilized combatant is obliged, at peril of being classed a savage, to avoid unnecessary cruelty to his enemy.
What's necessary cruelty?
Unless there has been unnecessary cruelty, whatever the suffering, there can be no barbarity.
It doesn't matter what they did.
If there has been unnecessary cruelty, all who are anyway responsible for it are infected with the taint of inhumanity. There's a lot in there.
You wouldn't want people thinking badly of you. So even if you did do these horrible things, you're not a barbarian if it were for an ethically vague reason.
Like, we go back to Indiana and Belloq, right? It's like, which one?
Yeah.
You and I are very much alike. I kill women and children, but I do it for what? Necessary reasons.
I know for necessary reasons. It's necessary. So yeah, he was excusing it. I was a little shocked and frankly disgusted that Hillsdale College was the one who, I didn't include those in the quotes, who included a whole lot of excusing of their own of the comments that he was making.
About the prison camps?
Yeah, they were what was the Churchill Project. So they're excusing this attitude. It's like it's not excusable any more than Kitchener's actions were excusable, and Churchill was trying to excuse Kitchener in these paragraphs that I included. It was pretty horrible. And right, so Franklin Roosevelt himself rounded up quite a few Japanese, and here's what people don't know, and Germans and Italians and a few others, I think, and put them into internment camps.
Yes.
Right. And so these are 3 different camps. Stalin did not start the gulags. He did not start, or what they called corrective labor camps. They called it corrective. They were pretty much death camps, right?
I don't think there's any way Stalin comes out the good guy in any of this.
He's not the good guy at all in this, but he had camps too. He did not start those camps. Those camps were started by Lenin. He greatly expanded them. He saw it as a great tool to get rid of undesirable people. To get rid of deplorables, right?
Right.
One might say.
Right.
And that continued until his death. And after his death, I guess the people who had been wanting to stop that and weren't able to because they themselves were killed whenever they tried were able to succeed in kind of scaling it way back. They still continued, but not at the scale Stalin had expanded them to.
Right.
But so all 3 of these men rounded up men, women, and children who were a problem and stuck them in camps. Now, the Boer camps run by the British were horrible. They were done specifically to starve and kill people to get other people to stop fighting. And Stalin rounded up men, women, children purposely to starve and kill them. Now, Roosevelt did not do this to starve and kill people. He did this, but he did round up men, women, and children and put them in internment camps because I can't trust you.
Right. It was the can't trust you.
He was right. He was probably the only one who actually was doing it for reasons of security. But that doesn't make it right. But yeah, I think I read one article years ago that said they even went into South America and extradited Germans living there, brought them to America and interned them in camps, which is just bizarre.
I had not heard of that. I knew about the Japanese camps. We did an exercise in high school, so in the 80s, you sort of play acting like what we would have done about the camps, the Japanese internments. But I didn't know there were Germans that were also.
Oh, Germans and Italians. Yeah, and they have never. Reagan made a public apology to the Japanese Americans. none was ever offered to the German Americans or the Italian Americans. And they were put in by the thousands, too. It wasn't as much as the Japanese, because it was mostly the Japanese on the West Coast that were targeted and moved inland. But it was about 10 to 1, but they were still interred. Whole families were.
Okay, so what's our lesson from this?
My lesson from this is they're all using the same tactics, but at different degrees. So they did mimic each other somewhat. They mimicked each other's tactics.
Well,
and I mean,
so I've done things on saying like the the military rallies, right? It's like if you don't know the insignia, it's hard to tell the difference between different marching formations of soldiers, right? Because
the way they march is very distinctive, though.
Well, okay, then you're looking for the the narcissism of fine different, what is it? Narcissism of small differences, right? and
the goose step is very, very famous.
Yes, but okay, so but they're still in like squares that the Europeans were developing from the 17th century is the way that you march around large groups of soldiers and such, and that they have parades through the cities, and like the sort of mimesis of all of these things ends up making, as we've said, all of the actors in a particular kind of system ending up looking the same, even though Indiana and Belloq are going to be insisting that they're Indiana's going to be saying no, you belong in the sewer, and Belloq going, actually, we're not that different. And at what point are you able to see, how different was Roosevelt from Stalin, from Churchill in their willingness to engage in similar practices?
Well, they all had an authoritarian streak. It was just it was a matter of degrees, and of course damage, right? I mean, the damage that Stalin did was unimaginable. And I didn't include any quotes from him because I couldn't find any primary sources. It's too easy to take. I mean, he's a real boogeyman, so it's too easy to take quotes that have been attributed to him and say, yeah, he did those. I don't want to ever do that, because then somebody can come back later and claim, well, you made that up. You probably made up the whole thing.
Right. Well, yeah.
I don't want that to happen. So,
I mean, it's interesting to me that okay, so Stalin is definitely boogeyman. Definitely, it's like and
it's deserved, because there's too many victims that have come forward as eyewitness victims to this stuff.
Right, but what I do find interesting is he's not as much of a boogeyman as Hitler is.
Right, and that's because we were fighting with him against Germany. If we weren't, he would have been just a big boogeyman. If he was off on his own, fighting his own war against both the Allies and the Axis, the Germans and the Allies, maybe he would have been just as big a boogeyman. There's also the fact that there were quite a few communist infiltrators in our government at the time, even in the 1930s, and in our newspaper, especially the New York Times, that were preventing bad things Stalin was doing from getting out into the wider consciousness. They wouldn't allow it to be published. Or I think it was Muggeridge. Was it Muggeridge? She printed outright lies that, no, there's nobody dying here. Nobody's being killed in these camps. These are wonderful places. Yeah, it was pretty diabolical. So there was an additional layer of stuff going on there. Well, why do we view Hitler so much worse? Because of that infiltration, and also because we were literally allied with him against Hitler, and so.
Well, this is what the point of the book that I've been reading is about. It's like how we ended up allied with him, as opposed to
necessity.
Well, no, as opposed to Germany simply fighting an Eastern war, which it mainly was, right? Most of the people died in the Eastern Front, not in the West. That England got into the war because Churchill stood fast, and that it's the huge debate over, in fact, whether to the degree to which it was ever Hitler's purpose to fight the West. So ironically, it would have been the same war anyway, but we wouldn't have ended up allied with the Soviets.
Yeah,
which is okay. So the meta question here is the And my poor dog is trapped because what have you done? What did you do? You went under the chair. Come on. He can't get out. There you go. Go out.
I just want to add one more thing about, and I don't know if this is true. Maybe there's some World War II scholars out there that can enlighten us in the comments. But the Russians had been fighting the Japanese decades earlier. So when the Japanese allied with the Germans, it was quite natural that, the Americans might ally with the Russians against both of them. So there might have been something like that going on.
Well,
because they were fighting over the Sakhalin Islands.
What I'm learning about this is it's like they say, the 3-body problems are hard to solve. This was way more than 3 bodies.
Correct.
And the number of broken alliances and new alliances, and the British had an alliance with this group, but then broke it to ally with that group, but then they broke it to like blah, blah, and it's like, okay, diplomacy is worse than the Mean Girls situation of who are you going to trust to stay on whose side at what point.
Well, the easy answer is you trust no one. Right?
Well, but then you have no friends, so
you don't. No, I have no illusions about that. But and I don't think anybody during the Second World War had any illusions about that either. But I think the relationships that developed, the official diplomatic relationships that developed were ones of necessity, immediate necessity.
I don't know enough in detail about how everything played out in World War II to do this off the top of my head.
Me either.
The mimetic problem, so there's the general problem historically of once you get a bit of distance and can see the similarities, the feeling of we were absolutely on the right side becomes trickier to sustain, because you can start, like you were comparing Sherman to Hitler. Right, Churchill, right?
No, Kitchener
to Sherman, right?
Right.
Sherman's a good guy, right? He was on the right side. You're not saying you're a Southerner, are you?
No, you can be on the right side of an issue and still do the wrong thing. You can, what Kitchener did was the wrong thing. What Sherman did was the wrong thing. They both did the wrong thing. FDR wanted to protect his country. He did the wrong thing. He should not have interned families. That was ridiculous. So yeah, there's always, when Belloq is telling Indy, all you need is a little push, just a little push. He's not wrong, right? People do the wrong thing all the time because they become obsessed with winning their righteous cause.
Okay, so the righteous cause is the desire.
Yes.
And the being pushed into the dark. So this is I hadn't thought of this as the way through into this problem, but Girard's main thesis is called the main book where it was with Scapegoat and Things Hidden from the Beginning of the World, but the book that made him famous was Violence and the Sacred. And we wanted to get to this, and we didn't manage last week because it was too hard, and we're trying to get it to this week, that the problem that he saw was that you spin up these rivalries and then there's no way out, right? And you could say that this is, what I'm realizing, I've read some about everything because I've read giant books on like big surveys of European history a lot. I've read little pieces of a lot of things. Every single time you go into any one of these historical narratives, you get closer and closer and closer to the fact of, I'm realizing it's like every single one of these decisions is based on one of these rivalries, right?
Yeah, we're still feeling the effects of that, aren't we? Russia, anyone? Right?
Well, that one,
but still using it.
But a lot of what Buchanan is talking about in this is, to certain extent, some of the rivalry be so and so insulted me, therefore I'm going to, not be able to make diplomatic arrangements with this guy. I feel ashamed and embarrassed, and so spin. Talk about how it's like one man's, wounded prestige, like Chamberlain, when he feels embarrassed because the pact that he made with Hitler didn't seem to have peace. And so then they end up siding with Poland, and then they end up dragged into the war. It's like they make these cascade of decisions, but it can be out of, because of this meeting and that guy and that one insulted me, and therefore I'm not going to be able to think clear-headedly anymore about the effects of these decisions. And that what Girard is describing is once these rivalries spin up enough, and the rivals, because the mimesis gets the rivals becoming more and more and more and more alike, it's like there's no way out. There's no backing down.
There's a lot going on at that kind of level of action when we're talking about geopolitics.
But I mean, geopolitics is the individual relationships spun up into the full system, right? It's fractal.
It is, but people take advantage of weakness, though, and I think they're keenly aware of that too. So it might be something more than just ego going on in that particular situation.
No, that's not what I'm saying. It's the dynamic of the mimetic rivalries is so, I don't want to say toxic because that's an overused word, but it's so compelling that it's very, very difficult for people to step out of them or break out of them.
I have to think about that some more. I'm trying to see how that applies to the Second World War, just as an example.
Well, it destroys the world, right? The mimetic rivalries unchecked destroy.
Yeah.
And that's what we did start with that, right? Saying don't covet, right? It's like,
right.
You could say easily, okay, got too much World War II on my mind, but
no, because it's directly related to today.
Yes,
because the things that were happening that are still going on today. That's why I said the Russia, right? This is the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, trying to use a popular theme that she grew up with and grew old with, and still keep it going because it's got political value, it's currency. Right, or so she thinks.
Okay, so these are two different elements or two different aspects of similar. One, if you've got one of these rivalries spun up, it's like a generator. And what you're describing is Pelosi I mean, this is even when Trump is talking about, Kamala Harris is a Marxist, and it's like they're relying on the still spinning of one of those. And if we think about, they're like batteries, right? Never mind the matrix and human batteries. Human batteries are these desire twinnings.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, there was some kind of outrage today, this week, of, was it that Russia was going to jail a comedian? That was right. Or insulting the military. I'm like, okay, 2 years ago, our government put a memer in jail because Hillary Clinton complained about it.
I'd forgotten about that. Who got put in jail?
Spare me the outrage. It was some guy in Florida. He made a joke, like a satire, an obvious satire
about voting.
About voting for Hillary. And she goes, you interfered and you confused people and made them think something. And they put him in jail. They put him in jail for a joke. So sit this one out.
Okay, but it's an example. Okay, this is okay. So like three things here, right? And our chat is helping to some extent. Caravaggio saying, if you want to talk dialectics and the results of World War II, aka the Cold War, is pretty impactful. Yes, and that's
for sure.
No estate but real estate. Okay, I don't know what Robert's talking about. Robert's having fun. Okay, so we have one. We talked about how they drive the drama, right? They actually make life exciting. It's just the horrible thing about them, right? So
we live in exciting times since they all turned to Chinese curves.
Yes. These would be interesting time. But it's like we talked about how with Indiana Jones, right? They make the story, right? It's like I do think,
oh, for sure,
going back to Churchill and his like glee,
mm-hmm.
right? It's like you feel yourself coming up and you're in the story. And therefore I do think people do enjoy them, frankly. Right. It's at some point you can be, it's a kind of giddiness of being caught in a real dynamic and
right. A movement.
Oh yeah.
Your inertia is alleviated for a bit.
Oh yeah.
I'm just thinking of a quote from Teddy Roosevelt now about, I think it was the Spanish-American War. He called it a splendid little war. It's just a splendid little war.
Yes, there's a real rivalry there, and it's it's delightful and fun. So they're battery like. There was another element to. They are destructive though, and but curiously they can be destructive and very hard to get out of at the same time, which is what Girard was trying to figure out. What's the off ramp as for this kind of spinning up. But what you're saying is even there's another layer of it that's very interesting, that if you are caught in, it's only in the context of one of these rivalries that hypocrisy even means anything.
That hypocrisy
means anything, because you cannot call someone out for being a hypocrite unless you actually share the focus in some way.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right. So, and that, and it's interesting. It's like we dissonant whatever we are, women who read too much. It gets frustrating when you see the hypocrisy of something like you just described, right? It's like, oh, look, Russia's been imprisoning comics. Well, so have we.
Exactly. Nobody else hypocrisy without a tinge of anger and sadness. It's never glee like, ha, I caught you being a hypocrite. No, people are really disappointed and angry whenever they find that. It's go ahead. It's because it's like you're trying to be sold. When somebody does that, they're trying to sell you a bill of goods. It feels like a manipulation when somebody says something and does something different.
Well, but it's Belloq telling Indiana, you're the same. You and I are the same, right?
Well, he did it with glee though, but yeah, I take your point.
I think he's supposed to be pretty insightful in that scene, and Indiana's drunk. But
yeah. He's having fun with them. He was just kind of evil.
No, it's meaningless. Okay, so we want the hypocrisy argument to land, saying, look, they jailed this guy in Florida for a joke. We're just as, our government, our system is being just as bad as the one that we're calling out Putin for.
Right. I think this just got me on another list of us.
We're doing deep cultural analysis here. Come on, Girard. It's a Girardian mimesis if you pay any attention. No, that the charge of hypocrisy only works within systems like this, right? So I'm praying. Yeah. Well, no, you're just performing the prayer. We're actually praying, right? So it's the difference between you're doing it correctly and you're doing it authentically and I'm doing it. Wait, no. Indiana is telling Belloq, you're being hypocritical about your. No, wait. I've lost myself. Sorry.
Okay.
The twinniness carried me away.
I think Belloq would have thought that Indy was being a hypocrite.
There it is.
Because Belloq was like, well, yeah, I'm doing it for money. So.
Right. Yes, that's what he's doing. He's calling out Indiana for being a hypocrite, saying you and I are very much alike.
What are you doing?
You're a hypocrite because you're pretending to be doing it for all these virtuous reasons, but in fact, we're both treasure hunters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I never thought about that before, but yeah, in the beginning, he actually stole an idol from its place of sacredness at this cave. It's like, well, it had been undisturbed and the people there still worshipped it, as Belloq proved when he held it up.
Right.
Right. And they all bowed down immediately.
Right.
So why was he taking it? Was he taking it? Well, I'm an indie fan, so I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he was going to take it before Belloq took it. But
we don't know that, right? That's why I say Belloq is only able to steal it from Indiana because he befriended the people and actually spoke Jovitos.
Language.
right? He actually spoke their language. So Belloq is calling Indiana a hypocrite, while Indiana is calling Belloq, René, a sewer rat, right?
Right.
But Belloq is actually right in the sense of we're doing the same thing. And so the um this becoming the problem then when we're analyzing something so big, it's not just a competition over the ark, but the actual war in which the movie is set, the degree to
very good. Yeah.
which one are we going to call out as a hypocrite? And that's what
our men are working on it. We have top men. Don't you worry about it.
That's what you've shown with your comparison of the different camps. It's like, oh well, our camps were good. I mean, indeed, our camp. Well, I mean, you could say, people have extended it to say, well, what do we do about our people on the reservations here? Whether we've taken proper care of the Native Americans on their encampments, right? That they were given. I don't think the American Indian reservations are as bad as the Gulag. But,
well, I mean, there was a time when they weren't allowed to leave it,
right?
The reservations, but that hasn't been a long. I had a friend in college who's talk about if you think your life is hard, you can always find somebody with an even harder life. Her grandmother took her father off the reservation because she could pass for black in the South. So that's how bad the Indians had it.
Okay,
in the early
good
part
example,
of the 20th century.
Right? Okay, so and this will be the kind of thing that everybody always ends up in an argument over. In which side was the good guys?
Yeah.
And there's Belloq saying we're doing the same thing. Yes. And there's that I like that he says archaeology is our religion. Girard would totally convince, not just because they're going after the Ark, because that's the religious object that they both want. It's we are caught up in this desire, and that's what is our religion.
Yeah, I could see that now. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
These are always sacred. There's always something sacred in this engagement. And Girard, I mean, his bigger project is trying to figure out what the sacred is, because he says, the anthropologists and the literary critics and the scientists and everything, we've not grasped it. There's something that, Girard is ultimately Christian, because he says that it's only Christianity that breaks the cycle of these sacrifices. It's like, it's back to our conversation with Davidson, right? It's Christianity or child sacrifice. That's it. It's Christianity or that correct. Or sacrifice. And Girard is trying to understand why Christianity is different from the other options. We're going to have a whole episode. Maybe we can pull it off next week on explaining why sacrifice works, which was what Girard's big project was trying to figure out. It's like, why is it that you have this victim who then brings peace, and that's the making sacred, right? It's whatever, right? But it all depends on the recognizing the real bindingness of these desires that gets people into these rivalrous dynamics. I've repeated myself. Anyway, war is a big one, right?
That's a word.
War is the giant version of these
of sacrifice.
That one, it's a giant version of sacrifice, but it's a giant version of these mimetic rivalries.
Yeah. Yeah, the Cold War is a good example. The arms race. Yeah. How many bombs have you got? It's like, well, how many do you need? That was the running joke, right? You need 10, you've got hundreds. What are they for? Because you have to keep up. You have to keep up with the Joneses or the Vladimirs, right?
Yeah.
Got to keep up.
Well, that's point two. The mimetic rivalry makes the competitors for the desired object more and more similar. And what the United States and the Soviet Union wanted was like hegemony. That as I remember growing up in the Cold War, It's, you can't let them, impose their system on unwilling populations. And
Right.
that being the American version of the Wilsonian point, saying self-determination, which is a complete disaster. Over and
Well, I
over and
mean,
over and over again. It's like,
self-determination,
which group defines itself?
right. Well, I mean, it'd be great if we're actually a thing, right? I'll bring up a Stalin quote, which I can't confirm if it's from him, but it gets repeated a lot. It doesn't matter how many votes a politician gets. It matters who counts the votes,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think we may have experienced that ourselves in this country 4 years ago. And that has been going on for a long time, not just 4 years ago. It's been going on in different areas, different states, different counties over the past 240 years. But
Well, and note the
yeah,
calling out of hypocrisy, right? It's like saying
hmm
the both systems claim to be for the people.
right.
Proletariat is meant to be the working class. So, communism allegedly, and the Soviet structure was allegedly for the people, and democracy is allegedly for the people. So they are actually communism and democracy in this Cold War are perfectly twinned
Right, because they make identical
because
claims,
they make identical claims.
right? Yeah.
Utopia is going to be available for both.
Hmm. I'm wondering if Americans were ever looking for utopia. I mean, it was famous that the Soviets wanted a workers' paradise. So you could say, yes, they wanted a utopia. There were utopians in our country, but I'm not sure they were in control of our government.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole.
It is.
But the American dream is the same sort of promise, right? The workers' paradise for American dream. One way or the other, you will thrive in
Right.
in this system. And I
You'll thrive if, yeah,
yeah. I so
you'll thrive if you work,
early
right?
Soviet. I have a lot of early Soviet posters in my slides for my Eurociv class, and it's like
Mhm.
one, they're all reading books. Right? They're very literate in their ambitions. And they're
Yeah.
images of sunrises and happy workers and such like that.
Mm.
And you say, okay, so that's the vision that they're working with. Well, we do the same thing. It's like Norman Rockwell, Saturday Evening Post.
Not just Norman Rockwell, but if I know you've been to Washington, D.C., so if you go through a lot of the government buildings in the 1930s, the WPA hired a lot of artists to draw murals, and they looked very Soviet. A lot of them did. It's really strange to look at that and realize that they were using the same kind of artwork and these rivals
Yep.
in Russia and in Washington, D.C., Moscow and Washington, D.C. Yeah, it's a perfect example of mimetic rivalry,
Constantly.
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one, it drives the drama, as we prove from a movie example. Two, you
Yeah.
can see it happening in history over and over again, and it's very, very
Mm-hmm.
fraught, because when you're caught in one of these, your side has to be the good guy, just like Indiana has to be the good guy, even though Belloq is right. Um, you know, whole communities end up spun up into these, and they are violent. They have this violence embedded in them, and that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
That's very terrifying. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so we have another example. I've lost my where I'm in my slides. Oh no, I rearranged them, right? Didn't I? I did.
Yes, you did.
Here we go. This one will be our third one for tonight. Pairs of sisters. You have some very interesting pairing of sisters here. On the one hand, Theresa and her sister, and on the other,
Aga.
Simone and
Uh-huh.
her sister.
Elaine. Yeah.
um, so everyone recognized that the one Theresa and her sister is Mother Teresa. Uh,
Yeah.
um, shall I
There
read the
were
passages so we have some introduction to them? Okay,
sure.
so one, I don't know anything about Mother Teresa except for she lived in India, but
She's Albanian.
okay.
So they're wearing their traditional Albanian costumes
Ah,
for that photograph.
oh, should I read, or you want to talk about her first?
Oh no, you go ahead
Okay.
and read.
Okay. So
Go ahead.
this is Mother Teresa is saying this from her work with the poor in India, right? The success of love is in the loving. It is not in the result of loving. Of course, it is natural in love to want the best for the other person, but whether it turns out that way or not does not determine the value of what we have done. There is more hunger in the world for love and appreciation in this world than for bread. The biggest disease today is not leprosy or tuberculosis, but rather the feeling of being unwanted. The greatest destroyer of peace is abortion, because if a mother can kill her own child, what is left for me to kill you and you to kill me? There's nothing between. So very beautiful on love as.
Yes, she wrote a lot about love, a lot. She did keep a journal, and I think it was published after her death, before she was canonized. But she wrote about it constantly. She wrote about love. She wrote about longing and loneliness, and she did see that as a terrible epidemic. She thought America was one of the most impoverished nations on earth because of the loneliness here.
Wow.
Yeah. And she did speak in Washington, D.C. To a room that included President Clinton, President and Mrs. Clinton, and Vice President and Mrs. Gore.
Mm-hmm.
And she made those comments on abortion right in front of them to a packed room. I was in that room once, actually, not at the same time. But yeah, she gave that speech, and everybody loved it except them. They were quite stony-faced. But I included that abortion quote because of the next one you're going to read. So, but mostly what struck me about Mother Teresa was she was constantly writing about love
Mm-hmm.
and talking about it, love and loneliness and longing, and the act of that's perfect. The act of loving somebody is its own reward. That's what you get out of it, is that you get to love somebody.
Right.
I think that's what she was saying. So that contrasted really well with somebody else, her contemporary. They were only 2 years apart in age. That she also wrote a lot about love and longing, but she had a radically different take on it. It was clear she wanted the same thing. To me, that she wanted the same thing, though, which made me very sad for her.
Well, it's saying, there's the mimetic desire, but love as a. Is it as a one mode of desire, or is it the actual desire, right? Love is all of our desires are in fact subsets of this longing. Yes. Yeah,
love and acceptance, and yeah.
So even yes. This is of course what the advertising all plays off of. Is like this thing, this object, this thing you can purchase. I do love shopping. Well, having purchased this object will make you feel better.
Right. You'll feel less empty.
You'll feel less. Yeah.
You'll feel less longing. Yeah.
And therefore it's this is in proper medieval understanding. Misdirected love is what the sorrow is, not the sorrow not in Buddhist sense of the desire at all, but the desire for the wrong object.
Yes.
That the true object is God, and then you're happy.
Uh-huh.
And the directing the love that we should have for our Creator to the things of the creation instead is what creates the sorrow. Not, in fact, the desire as such, but the misdirected love. So start with the first commandment, love the Lord,
Right.
Well, not,
right.
No
That's
other
the
God.
very first one.
No other God before me. Do not be coveting all of this other stuff. Focus instead your love on God, which is what Theresa did.
Yes, she did.
That sounds good. It's too bad Simone didn't figure this out. Okay, so this is Simone de Beauvoir. Some from the Second Sex and some from the Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter. The curse which lies upon marriage is that too often the individuals are joined in their weakness rather than in their strength, each asking from the other instead of finding pleasure in giving. That's from the Second Sex. Be loved, be admired, be necessary, be somebody. Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter. And it must be added that the men who most respect embryonic life are the same one who do not hesitate to send adults to death and war. The Second Sex.
Yeah, these two women sounded so similar to me
Mm.
in the way they were writing, right? Because they both talk about abortion, being, well, Mother Teresa wrote about, abortion being violence and it would lead to war. And Simone says, well, they already send people to war, so what's the difference,
Ah, yeah.
right? So because she had helped get her friend get an abortion in 1949, and I think her friend nearly died from it.
Mm.
And so she was a big proponent of abortion because she was also a big proponent of becoming more like men. But that's not in any of the quotes
Right.
that I provided. But that women could not really be free until they were like men, right? And I think she meant that sexually too, that they shouldn't be relegated to a role of housekeeper and homemaker and mother and wife, that they should be free to be anything. But at the same time, that second quote that you read, that was from Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter,
Mm-hmm.
be somebody, right? It's like, this is a woman who doesn't think she's being seen or doesn't feel important, and she desperately wants to be important. There's that longing, that kind of loneliness that that quote said to me when I read it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I if this woman was thinking, I am desperate to be seen, to be somebody, to make something of myself, and it's utmost important to her. And that just screamed loneliness to me. And the first quote, she's talking about love, sounds again very similar to what Mother Teresa said. The reward of loving somebody is its own reward. You get to love somebody. And then Simone de Beauvoir talks about, joyfully loving somebody because you're getting joy from it. It sounded so similar to me.
But so they are both talking about the desire.
Yes.
And I mean, so they're both important to us in the theme of mimetic desire, because one has been recognized as a saint and the other one is the mother of the current wave of feminism, I think, unless we have another wave. But
She thinks
she's
so.
not a,
I've got another example coming up.
what? Do I have more?
That was the last two.
Oh, yeah.
Not from her.
No.
Yeah.
Well, but
Yeah.
anyway, so both of them are objects of mimetic desire, because
Yeah.
some look at Theresa and say, we learn from her how to be, which is what the imitatio Christi is the imitation
Yeah.
of the saints is a subset of the imitation of Christ, because the saints are imitating Christ, and we learn from the saints how, although I mean, this is a footnote, but in proper fashion, we each imitate Christ and become more ourselves, because our imitation of Christ is going to be particular to ourselves. But looking at the saints, we learn different modes of that imitation, but it's all of Christ, right? So you're focusing all onto imitating him. So what Theresa is doing is pointing us to the proper object of that mimetic desire,
Yes.
God.
Yeah.
And we, looking at her, learn how to look at him, as we do with any of the saints, right? You're sort of being shown it's like a pointer. The saints are pointers for us, so that we know how to well, and they should also, they by their love for God, inspire our love as well. So the mimetic
Right.
desire works.
Now, Mother Teresa was very famous for taking care of the dying. She also took care of a lot of orphans and got a lot of them adopted out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but she started because she was taking care of outcasts in India who were dying on the streets. These people probably died pretty quickly. So when she talks about giving love and love being its own reward, she's not getting anything back. The people who would love her back and say thank you are dying very quickly because that's who she first started helping, right? So de Beauvoir is talking about people being people being, you know, basically attached to each other in their weakness when all that you really care about is joy. It sounds to me like if, somebody who thinks they have to get something out of it for themselves back from the other person. I think she's lamenting that this isn't what marriage is, and it should be. I don't know if she and Sartre were ever married.
I don't think
I don't know if they were.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure they weren't monogamous. That's for sure.
No, they weren't, because I mean, and why would you be, right? Because I don't feel joyful. I'm going to go to somebody else who I feel joyful with. I'm getting joy back, right? So Mother Teresa's not getting joy from anybody. Maybe she says, no, I'm joyful because I'm able to love somebody. That's it. It's not something, it's not the feeling I'm getting back from them. It's the actual act itself of giving. I think is what she was saying with that quote.
I think it's, I mean, famously, it's like she has girlfriends and Sartre wants them because she has the girlfriends. So, you know, they're like a demonstration of the problem, that he wanted whatever she had. And I'm not sure whether it went the other way.
So they were twinning each other, mimetic twinning each other.
It's sort of. Well, I mean, but I say she wanted, you're right. She wanted to the second sex is saying, you know, that men use women as the other, right? But what she's actually saying is men look at women as objects of desire. And she doesn't like that sense of being looked at. And yet what she's saying in Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter, is she saying, is this what she's been commanded to do? Be loved, be admired, be necessary, be somebody. Is that feels like a thing of saying, this is what I was told I was supposed to be.
I'm not sure. Well, I'm just taking a guess. Be somebody. What does that mean? Be somebody's wife? Maybe if she said that, that would have been her, you know, objecting to that. But just be somebody. Just be important.
Well, but that's what's funny about it. It's like she's rejecting. Okay, so her problem. So here we have Theresa, who as a saint is pointing us to the proper desire, which is God, and then we have
and self-giving love. Just give everything, right?
Which the saints are capable of doing because they're focused on God.
Yes, because you couldn't do what she did and not be focused on God. It would destroy you. It would destroy most people, because death isn't normal. It isn't normal to look at. I know it's natural, but it's not an everyday normal thing.
Well, in the context in which she saw it, was like, what do you end up in Buddhism? It's like, oh, this is, right?
Yeah.
Escape from this horror of suffering.
A prince leaves his palace and sees bad suffering the way she must have seen it. So, we need to stop this. How do I stop this? Right. And he develops his system of philosophy to do that. Whereas Mother Teresa said, well, you're not going to stop it. You love them anyway. They're going to die. You love them anyway. Mm. Yeah, you're going to be sad. Be joyful anyway. Be joyful for Christ. You know, this is why she's a saint and I'm not. Like I said, it would destroy most people.
But that's what he's saying. It doesn't destroy the saints because they've got their focus of their object of desire correct. And that we learn from the saints. I mean, the mimetic desire of watching the saints and imitating them, loving God is like basic to, that's what devotion to the saints is about, right? It's using them as arrows pointing at, like they're signposts to what to desire. Mm-hmm. That de Beauvoir is frustrated that men look at women and desire them and feel and for her, from her perspective in the second sex, it's like, and made them the object. So there is, as far as she's concerned, from her perspective as a woman, she gets no desire herself, right? She just is to be desired. That's what I think is going on in the memoirs of I'm told, it's like, I grew up being told, you must be loved, you must be admired, you must be, right? So she's she's upset with being told you must be an object. No.
But she wanted to be someone so bad.
Well, she ended up being desired, right, as the model, ironically, for having no relationships.
For having no relationships. Yeah, it's a really weird thing where she was basically a slave to this man.
Yes. And
she would probably not call herself that. And I remember with a famous Hollywood couple, they weren't married. They had an adulterous affair for decades. It was Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. Mm. And she gave an interview once about her relationship with him. And I felt really bad for her. I mean, she basically said, she didn't use the word slave, but she said that she said, he threatened to leave me all the time. I had to be on my best behavior all the time because he had a wife to go home to. So I had to be perfect. I had to be perfect. And this, I think, might be some of what she might have been feeling all the time, because she didn't leave them. She always went back to them. They were a couple, right?
Well, okay,
And she
so
had girlfriends too.
she's it's the Beauvoir, yeah. With Sartre, it's Hepburn's caught in one of these. She wants Tracy. I mean, I bet if he'd divorced his wife, she'd have lost interest,
Possibly.
right?
Possibly. Hard to say.
That's what I mean. The sort of drama level that Girard is understanding when he's saying, you know, you want the thing that you see someone else wanting. So, and that
Yeah.
adultery is like a really perfect example of that. You know, this is a feature in people's stories, right? You know, it's like this mad, passionate affair when both are married, and then they leave their spouses, and oh, now it's boring, right?
Now it's boring,
right?
And, or as the women always tell other women, don't you think he's going to cheat on you too?
Well, that,
right?
but
but it's the same thing, because they do it, like you said, it's about the excitement.
But it's that twinning of desire that makes it desirable, and that the without it, there's nothing, right? There's no drama. I mean, there's no drama. There's no history. There's
and poof, disappears.
Which is really frustrating to think, okay, wait a minute. So what you're saying is life is really dull unless you're caught up in one of these sinful triangles.
Unless you're in drama.
There'd be no.
Well,
sometimes I do think this. I mean, it's like we said, this Churchill is playing this. You know, it's like, wow, it's so exciting, right? It's like, look what you're wanting to be exciting. Or it's Simone de Beauvoir, right? It's like, back up here. It's.
I think she spent her whole life trying to convince herself that she wasn't bothered by this.
Oh yeah, I know. She wrote an 800-page book to try to convince herself she wasn't bothered by it. She was bothered by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of apparent. Yeah. She was bothered. I mean, yeah, like you said, she was bothered that she was seen as an object of desire by men, but she didn't want to be married, because that would all disappear, and then so would she.
Well, no, I think it's okay. So which one do we have next? Maybe we do get to these two ladies. I think they encapsulate it quite well, this problem that we're now trapped in.
Yeah,
and I think, you know, this is there's a fair degree of sorrow in this problem of saying, okay, on the one hand, I started with saying Girard does not see this problem of mimetic desire as fundamentally sorrowful. But on the other hand, it's like we've gone through war, lying, hypocrisy. Seems like all sin is trapped up in this. And certainly this is the two Marys, right? Mother and daughter this time. Mary Wollstonecraft and her daughter, Mary Shelley, talking about a similar sort of problem for women, right? So Mary Wollstonecraft, who's in the white, they're in white and black. This is interesting. Okay. Mary Wollstonecraft. Would men but generously snap our chains and be content with rational fellowship instead of slavish obedience, they would find us more observant daughters, more affectionate sisters, more faithful wives, more reasonable mothers, in a word, better citizens. And that's Mary Wollstonecraft in Vindication of the Rights of Woman, with this idea that if we could just break out of all of these
and she sounds like Simone de Beauvoir there to me.
Well, she's the grandmother of all feminism, for sure.
Yeah, she didn't invent it, in other words. So
right. Mary Shelley, her daughter, invents Frankenstein. Okay.
Frankenstein.
And here, Frankenstein, the monster, is talking to the doctor who made him, right? I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural lord and king, if thou wilt also perform thy part, the which thou owest me. O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous.
She's mirroring her mother's writings there.
How so?
Well, yeah, if you'll only be kind to me and I'll be a much better person, right? If only the men will be kind to the women, they'll be much better citizens. They'll be joyful and happy and productive, right? And this is kind of what Frankenstein himself is saying. I'm almost thinking
the monster.
Gee, was Frankenstein
this is the monster saying
the monster. Yeah. The Frankenstein's monster. Was Frankenstein's monster supposed to be Mary Shelley? Was that a self-insert?
You know what Michael Jones says, right? That it's the trauma of this fantasy version of marriage that, again, I mean, she's Shelley, yeah. They had committed adultery. Shelley was married when she and he ran off to Switzerland and had their literary retreat with Byron and
it was Byron.
And then she writes Frankenstein out of that situation, which is horror, right? This horror of being caught in that rivalry. And then Shelley's first wife kills herself.
Yes. Yeah, all around horrible. I mean, the real story is the horror story.
Yeah, yeah. But Mary Wollstonecraft and her. I mean, I think she died giving birth to Mary Shelley.
She did.
But that she had been abandoned by the first man that she'd fallen in love with, and I mean, I can rehearse these stories and then I forget because it's painful to remember exactly how much agony these women go through. But there's no sense of fidelity or marriage in them. They get constantly caught up in these rivalries.
Yes. So Mary Shelley was, I thought, mirroring the philosophy of her mother. She's having the monster speak her mother's words because her mother's words are what led her to the lifestyle she has, which has not brought her happiness.
Right. Well, so it seems there's a problem here of the, I mean, again, the way out, right? What's the off ramp to these? The excitement. I think, you know, Girard doesn't really point to this in this way, but I think it's the truth, which we've been talking about, that sometimes the people do not necessarily find being caught in these rivalrous twinnings. Well, they're not boring. It's for sure. We put them in our stories because they seem to drive the stories. They recur constantly. They are the sources of the kinds of things that we scream hypocrisy at with each other, but we seem to keep falling into them.
Yeah. Where's the off ramp?
Well, that's to be continued.
Cliffhanger.
Well, so we've had Robert making I think he says he's making chapter titles. Okay, that's good. That the first step is to see how these twinnings are present, because otherwise you're absolutely convinced that you know who the good guy is, right? Which is our opening with going back to Belloq in Indiana, right? That you're set up in the story to know which one's the good guy and which one's the bad guy, but the problem is they're twins. Like this, Cain and Abel is a good one. It's like the Lord rejects Cain's offering, and of course he's mad at his brother.
Right, but he's also jealous of the attention God gives him.
Yeah, but I mean, right? Come on, Cain's a farmer and Abel's a shepherd, and Abel brings him a sheep and Cain brings him grain. It's like, why should the Lord be unhappy with Cain's offering? And this seems to me just to be a story about how the shepherds, you know.
No, didn't Cain give him like the worst of his crops, could keep the best back for himself and then give the leftovers to God? Isn't that how that worked?
I have to look it up.
Because he tried to pull a fast one. God's like, yeah, I can see everything.
Hmm.
So he didn't give him the best.
Well, anyway, there's a lot of these twins in the Old Testament.
But it was envy. It was
Yeah.
envy. He desired to please God. And his brother did it. His brother succeeded where he didn't, and he got angry and killed
Yeah.
him.
So I'm gonna look this up now. I'm not gonna let your memory twin
I hope I'm
mine,
right.
and well, I just don't know. I don't know. We'll have to find out, won't we? Okay. It's the book of Genesis. There's oh well, okay, so I was thinking about this. It's like would have Eve ever like taken the apple if the snake hadn't gone, looks good? Right?
Was it pumpkin spice
Oh,
flavor?
what's a pumpkin spice flavor? The temptation of the serpent pointing and saying, "See, it looks good, doesn't it?" Right? That again, Girard
Yeah.
points to that we can see this generation of desire in our mythologies.
Oh, but it was yeah, but yeah, the serpent saying, yeah, you'll be like God, right? You want what he's got, don't you? This'll do it. Yeah, it's
I
creating the
don't think,
desire to.
no, I think you're making excuses. Cain doesn't give them the bad stuff. So,
Doesn't he? Doesn't he
no,
keep the best
it
stuff for
came to
himself?
pass after many days that Cain offered of the fruits of the earth gifts to the Lord.
Okay.
And Abel also offered of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord had respect to Abel and to his offerings. But to Cain and his offerings he had no respect. And Cain was exceedingly angry, and his countenance fell.
Mm.
I think God's just being mean. And you know, maybe next, okay, so possibly next week, we're still going to keep you on a cliffhanger. We should look, and this also means that I have to read more and stop reading about World War II and read about, mythology again. Go through some of Girard's examples so that you can see how he reads the mythologies to get to this point of saying, no, Cain and Abel were both giving gifts, and
Hmm.
Abel's were accepted and Cain's weren't. But there's nothing in the story that says Cain's were like mean or squeamish. It's he offered his first fruits and Abel offered his, and Cain and God liked Abel's and not Cain's. And that and then that, I mean, Cain is the one who founds all the cities, right? It's generation of all civilization is from Cain. There's a mystery there.
Yeah. Is it a bad thing or a good
We'll
thing?
find out. All right. Hopefully now the concept is a little clearer about the way the twinnings work and how generative they can be, never mind the AI, and
Yeah,
how they work at all of that. They work at so many different levels that in Girard's understanding, they underpin our humanity.
they do. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, as you said, you could just point to the Bible and the literature and mythology, and it's woven throughout all of it. You can't have a human story without it. So there must be something to it.
Cool. We hope you join us next time. So as we continue this journey into understanding the roots of the sacred. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends to like us. That'll be nice. Get some mimesis going with the Mosaic Ark. Good night, everyone.